closed-loop production, and this list is very long. There is an emphasis on green capitalism and sustainable business. And so when we do see a more systematic approach within the mainstream, it's almost always defined by greening the current system without making major changes. A great example of this is solar panels, which still require an industrial infrastructure that uses oil. They require the mining of rare earth minerals that then have to be smelted using oil-powered furnaces, and they require international trade. And there's focus on positive emotions and positive energy. This is one that I have a lot of personal experience with. When I talk about how bad the environmental crisis is and how urgently we need to take action, I get a lot of responses from people who say, "You're being so negative," or "Why are you so doom and gloom?" and so on. And you know, I think it's really absurd to say that I'm being negative for pointing out what is going on. The real negativity is really in the destruction and oppression that I'm trying to illuminate. The most positive thing to me is when people are as real as they can possibly be. And humans are amazing, complex creatures who can hold in their hearts what is really going on, even if it's something as bad as ecological apocalypse, while at the same time being able to have a damn good time. And we can still understand that life is really delicious, and we can still notice and participate in the beauty of each passing moment. It is self-delusion that I find most negative. And speaking of self-delusion, we have magical thinking, where thought equals action. This is where it gets really wonky, but this is something we see again and again. After people say I'm negative, they often talk about the burgeoning environmental awareness they see, about how this movement is growing and spreading through the culture. Well, as I talked about earlier, that has been co-opted in many ways, which is why this may appear to be true, while at the same time all the indicators of ecosystem health, biodiversity, and everything is going down, faster and faster. So, if environmentalism were to follow this bright green trajectory, how might things look in the next 50 to 100 years? I think we will see institutions begin to ramp up their response as they realize how serious the situation is. We'll see a growth in wind power and solar and other alternative energies, but the mainstream response will be muted, as we have seen in the UN climate talks over the last few years. The institutional and governmental response will continue to focus on increasing the health of the economy, as we've already seen. This is a crucial point. The governmental response so far has been completely useless. Just look at what happened at the Copenhagen conference, which many people call the last chance for a meaningful international agreement. This is important. The economic and governmental system is structurally incapable of responding to problems like these because it has been built from the beginning for the task of growth and consumption. That's what we're up against here. An entire structure that was created a long time ago for a certain purpose, growth and consumption. And it was built without the threat of planetary annihilation in mind, which means it doesn't have the tools to respond appropriately to that threat now that it has become a reality. Not only that, but anything that threatens growth and consumption is met with state repression. And so what does that mean for our strategy and our tactics? I also think we will see fossil fuels exploited at increasing rates. Industry is projecting a 30% growth in consumption in the next 20 years. To understand this, we only need to look at hydraulic fracturing for natural gas, deep water drilling, and tar sands projects which are beginning to be exploited. An increasing human population will continue to press in on the few remaining hotspots of cultural and biological diversity. And of course, as climate change starts to take a more serious effect, things will get really nasty. The oceans will continue to acidify, basically removing any hope of recovery after decades of industrial fishing. The sea level will continue to rise, inundating coastlines and causing millions of refugees to flee. We'll see more frequent and more powerful storms, floods, droughts, and forest fires. Diseases will expand their range. Water availability and crop yields will decline. And what's really scary is that that's not the worst of it. Once the warming gets going and once positive feedbacks in the climate system start to ramp up, the permafrost starts to thaw out, the Amazon starts to die back, and there's the possibility of tipping the planet into a Venus-like state, with an atmosphere saturated with carbon and temperatures too high to sustain any life other than certain bacteria. And the fact that scientists are seriously talking about this Venus syndrome, as they call it, should be a wake-up call that something is not going right here. So now we can ask the question, what would a serious environmental movement look like? I want to be candid with you for a number of reasons. One being that so often when someone talks to me about environmental issues, I feel that they're not telling me the whole story, that they're hiding the truth from me, and I have no intention of doing that tonight. I want to be as honest as I can with you. Now, as a radical environmentalist, I want to be clear that the law is not the basis of legitimacy for me. Life, this earth, the land, is the basis of legitimacy for me, because the land is primary. The land is what gives life. Laws are simply rules made by rich people that are used to maintain the status quo, and that statement is historically defensible. Dr. Stephen Best, a prominent animal rights activist and professor of philosophy at the University of Texas, said that, quote, "If the law won't do the right thing, other people will have to do the right thing, and they'll have to do the right thing by breaking the law. And that precedent has been set many times throughout our history," end quote. So with that being said, I believe it's useful for us to ask, what will environmentalism in the next generation look like? What can we expect? When I look at what we have now, at the general feeling in the environmental movement, I'm worried. Sometimes I even wonder if it's appropriate to call it an environmental movement, if it actually is a movement. Because movements, generally thought, are when groups of social actors sustain a certain level of confrontation with political or other elites in the name of a larger goal. And I don't see that happening right now in any meaningful way. I see a bunch of really great people whose hearts are in the right place and are doing some amazing work, but they don't understand what it will take for us to win this. We've been going to those in power as if they were our masters, asking them nicely to solve these problems, when we should have known from the beginning that it would be us or no one. To underscore all of this, we need to be aware of the timeline we're facing. On climate change, the general position is that we have until 2020 to cap emissions, and until 2050 to reduce emissions by 80 to 90%. If not, we'll push far beyond an atmospheric carbon concentration of 450 parts per million, possibly beyond 650 parts per million. And the effects of that would be catastrophic, as we know. Simply put, that's not an option. So how might an actual environmental response look? Well, it would have clear and reachable goals, such as an end to all earth-destroying practices. I think that's a modest goal, really, and I think that most, if not every, human species would agree with this. Take salmon, for example. We know what is killing salmon. Dams, industrial logging, industrial fishing, industrial agriculture because of chemical runoff, and the burning of fossil fuels. These things must stop. If you think you can reform them from within, go for it. I personally have no interest in that approach, and I think it could never work on its own unless it's part of a larger strategy. Now, on the one hand, these industrial systems are long-established practices, organized by major institutions, and thus they look untouchable. They seem so far beyond you and me here. On the other hand, if it's understood that these practices must be stopped, then it doesn't matter how established they appear. We will find a way because it's our survival that's at stake. And lucky for us, the reality is that these practices are not invincible. They are far from it. Sectors of the government are frequently taxed with inspecting the power grid, the railways, industrial infrastructure in general, and the results are fairly consistent that even by their standards, they are amazed that these things are still standing. So here's an alternative scenario to the one I mentioned before. It's decided that carbon emissions have to be reduced by 80 to 90% by 2020. It's recognized that no government will in any way pursue that target. This means that we must stop these practices. The immediate problem we run into is that the majority of the population would never support us and would likely be the first ones to come down on us. Fishing, logging, agriculture, these are people's jobs, no doubt. And governments haven't done anything to create other options for people. But regardless, these practices have to stop because the planet is primary. The planet takes precedent over the economy. If we don't have healthy ecosystems, we can't even have an economy. So then the question becomes, can we do this without the majority of the population? Well, minority groups have shown throughout history that it is possible to work against the majority, so yes, we can. Then the question becomes, how can we do this without the majority? At this point, I keep coming back to the following strategy. Nationwide or global actions taken by coordinated groups of individuals that would dismantle key nodes of industrial infrastructure. Now, we're not talking about the Earth Liberation Frontier. No symbolic actions on ski resorts or cell phone towers. We mean business. Literally, I mean industry. The extractive industries, the refining industries, the industries that daily drive us closer to certain apocalypse. None of this is out of the question. It's not impossible. In fact, I think it's more possible than many of us imagine. It might seem impossible only because no one has done it yet. When I talk about industrial civilization of the global economy, I'm not talking about monolithic power structures towering over us. I'm talking about an unstable system of technologies that are being used for resource extraction and distribution that are serving primarily a small elite portion of the population. Disrupting that system can be done. So let's say, for example, that works. Let's say that groups of people are able to significantly disrupt the workings of US industry, which could happen in many different ways. We'd see an immediate reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, the scale of which most environmentalists would wet their pants over. If it was effective enough that the grasslands were allowed to return, even just on the land east of the Mississippi River, instead of the agriculture that's occurring there now, in only a decade, we'd see a huge percentage of the carbon released since the Industrial Revolution onwards pulled back into the ground, and we'd start to begin to see the Earth recover. This is what excites me. This is the only strategy that I've been presented with that actually accounts for my desire for a planet to live on in 50 years. It's the only strategy that clearly shows to me that we can both prevent the destruction of the planet and provide a future place that's inhabitable for generations to come. And my wager with people is modest. I tell them, if you don't like this strategy, give me another one that works, another one that leaves us with a place to call home. And so regarding this strategy, for you all here, take it or leave it. Play with it, wear it around a while. It's clearly not everyone's cup of tea, but just as I ask other people, I'll ask all of you here. If you don't agree with it, that's fine. But please come up with another strategy that brings us to the same conclusion, which is a place to call home. Now, these coordinated actions against industrial infrastructure that I'm talking about, if they were to happen, would be accomplished by a very small percentage of a movement. Only 1% to 2% of traditional occupational resistance movements ever pick up arms. The other 98% are doing support work. Right now, though, we don't even have a movement that can support a 1% to 2%. We don't have a movement that can provide loyalty and material support to any underground activists. What I'm proposing here tonight is that we build that movement. In order to pave the way for a resistance movement that will confront the systems that are destroying the planet, we're going to need to build an oppositional culture that will be able to provide that loyalty and material support to those who are willing to resist. Now, the above-ground, culture-building wing of this movement has a unique position. It operates with the understanding that above-ground organizing up to this point has been largely ineffective, while at the same time recognizing that above-ground work is extremely important. There is an entire spectrum of work to be done, from immediate actions that directly confront power to organizing for a multi-generational grassroots movement. Now, we can be sure that one of the first things we should be doing is forming groups and organizations that are explicitly oppositional. To this end, we started Fertile Ground. We made it a federal 501c3 nonprofit so we could apply for grants to fund projects and events. We made a website that lists deep green principles and then also acts as an information hub with videos, articles, reading lists, a discussion forum, and other resources. Although we're still figuring out exactly what Fertile Ground's role will be in the context of a larger movement, we've done a lot of local organizing, hosting events, rallying support for local environmental legislation, among other things. We need more organizations like Fertile Ground that are dedicated to building leadership and providing educational materials for other groups, coordinating events, and grooming speakers and workshop facilitators to travel and present. But we also need more localized affinity groups that are focused primarily on local issues. To this end, another group has formed called Deep Green Whatcom. Localized affinity groups like Deep Green Whatcom will most likely be the groups that conduct targeted campaigns to protect ecosystems and that disrupt or halt destructive activities. Now, if you're going to be in one of these explicitly oppositional organizations, it would be a good idea to right away learn your constitutional rights, have a good understanding of methods of state repression, and develop a strategy to ensure the survival of your group in the face of such repression. Members of Deep Green Whatcom, for example, have held multiple security culture presentations specifically for this purpose. Whatever group we form or join, another one of the first things we should do is build relationships with other local groups that have overlapping goals. These groups could be focused on indigenous rights, women's defense, ecosystem defense, social justice, anti-racism work, anti-corporate personhood work, local transition town initiatives, or other pro-autonomy groups. And of course, Bellingham is a great place for this because we already have a lot of these groups represented. Transition Whatcom, Living Democracy.